The storm rolled in from the north, like a living thing. By nightfall, Red Mesa had vanished beneath white silence, its red cliffs buried under drifts that glowed faintly blue in the moonlight. Wind howled across the flats, shaking the windows of a lone cabin, tucked against a rise of cedar and stone. Inside, James Greyhawk sat by the fire, oil lamp burning low, his hands broad, scarred, and sure worked a strip of leather across his knee, mending the reins of a young mare that had kicked them clean apart that morning. The rhythm of his work kept his thoughts steady. He was 32, shoulders hardened by years under the Arizona sun, his long black hair tied loosely at the nape. The left side of his face carried a faint white scar, a reminder of a cavalry bullet from a war that the government said was finished, but that never really ended for men like him. On the mantel above the hearth stood a small bundle of raven feathers bound by sinew, a spirit token for his late wife, Maya. Every evening, James burned cedar for her, letting the smoke climb through the chimney and out into the wide, indifferent night. The scent filled the cabin, sharp and clean, a comfort in a world that had forgotten softness. He had lived 3 winters alone since her passing. Silence had become his closest companion. Silence, and the horses that still came to him for breaking. The wind lifted again, fierce enough to rattle the shutters. James rose, checked the latch on the door, and glanced at the herd through the frosted window. Their dark shapes huddled close to the barn, breath steaming, eyes glinting like embers. He told himself tomorrow he'd need to cut more hay from the stack if the snow let up. He was halfway to sitting again when it came. A sound that didn't belong. 3 sharp knocks. Not the creak of wood or groan of wind. This was human, hurried, frightened. James' hand went to the rifle propped by the door. Nobody came this far after dark. Not white men, not traders, not even the mescalero riders who sometimes passed through the canyons. For a long second he stood still, feeling the storm press against the walls, and then he unbarred the door. A blast of snow burst in, biting his face. Through it, a child stood small, shivering, hair clumped with ice. A girl, maybe 7. Her cheeks were raw from cold, her hands red and cracked. "Please," she gasped, voice barely a whisper. "Please, mister, he's hurting my mama." The words hung between them like smoke. James stared at her, heart thudding 1 inch, heavy. Her boots were torn, the hem of her dress frozen stiff. She could barely keep her footing in the wind. He should have shut the door. The old law of survival whispered it. Don't meddle in white men's troubles. Every Apache who had forgotten that rule had paid for it in blood. But the girl looked up at him with eyes too desperate for refusal. He knelt so they were level. "Where's your mother?" "Down by the creek, the house with the broken barn." Her breath came in shivers. "He's beating her again." James took in the distance, half a mile maybe, through snow that reached his knees. He looked back at the warmth of the fire, then at the child's trembling shoulders. "Stay close," he said at last. He pulled his coat from its peg, grabbed a lantern, and stepped into the storm. They moved through the snow in silence. The wind knifed at their faces, each gust filling their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Twice the girl stumbled, and James lifted her under one arm, her body light as a bundle of sticks. The only sound was the soft crunch of boots and the far-off creak of trees bowing under ice. At last the house appeared, a sagging shack, crouched near the frozen creek, one window glowing yellow through the dark. The door was half open, slamming against the jamb with every gust. From inside came a harsh voice, slurred and ugly, followed by a sound no storm could bury. The crack of flesh meeting flesh, and a woman's muffled cry. James set the lantern down in the snow. "Wait here," he told the girl. "Don't move until I come for you." She nodded, too frightened to speak. He crossed the yard in long silent strides. Inside, the air reeked of whiskey and smoke. Near the hearth, a man sat in a broken chair, a bottle in one hand, laughter bubbling through his beard. On the floor lay a woman, Anna, her wrists bound with rope, her hair tangled across her bruised face. "What in hell?" The man started when James' shadow filled the doorway. His eyes narrowed. "Get out of my house, redskin." James said nothing. The firelight gleamed on his scar, his stillness more dangerous than any shout. "I said get out." The drunk lurched forward, swinging the bottle. James caught his wrist midair. The sound of bone snapping was swallowed by the roar of wind through the open door. The bottle shattered. The man screamed, clutching his arm. Before he could draw the pistol at his belt, James' fist struck once, heavy and final. The man dropped where he stood, sprawling across the floorboards. Jemmy knelt beside the woman. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, full of pain and confusion. He cut the rope with his knife, then lifted her carefully, his coat wrapping around her like another layer of warmth. The drunk moaned from the floor. "You'll hang for this," he spat weakly. "She's my wife, mine." James met his gaze. "She's breathing," he said. "That's more than you deserve." He stepped out into the storm, the woman limp in his arms. The girl saw them and ran forward, tears freezing on her cheeks. "She'll live," James murmured, though he wasn't certain. "Come." By the time they reached the cabin, the storm had swallowed the world whole. Snow clung to James' hair and lashes, his breath ragged from the climb. Inside, the cabin glowed with weak firelight. He laid Anna on his bed, covered her with wool blankets, and stoked the fire until it burned bright again. The girl Elia, she said her name, was hovered beside him, eyes wide, clutching the edge of the blanket as if afraid her mother might vanish. "She'll be all right," James told her softly. "Let the fire warm her." He fetched a bowl, mixed crushed herbs with warm water, and pressed the poultice gently against Anna's bruises. She stirred once, a whisper leaving her lips something that might have been a name. When he finished, James rose and poured a cup of hot water for the child. "Drink slow," he said. Elia looked up at him through lashes wet with tears. "What's your name?" "James," he replied. "James Greyhawk." The girl nodded, trusting him with the simple faith of the very young. She lay beside her mother then, holding her hand. James sat near the hearth, watching the snow drift past the window. The horses in the barn would be safe for the night. He could hear them shifting, restless, but alive. What came tomorrow? He couldn't guess. He thought of the man lying down by the creek, of the town beyond it, of the laws that never favored men of his blood. He'd sworn after Mia's death that he'd never interfere with white folks' troubles again. Yet here he was, breaking that vow like brittle wood underfoot. The fire popped, sending sparks toward the ceiling. James stared into the flames and whispered in Apache, a prayer of protection, of strength. Outside, the storm howled, covering every trace of their path. Inside, 3 souls shared the same fragile warmth, the man, the woman, and the child he'd pulled from the cold. The storm eased toward dawn, though the wind still carried a low moan across Red Mesa. By morning, the land lay hushed beneath a blanket of white, so deep that even the fence had vanished. The world seemed clean, emptied of noise and men's cruelty, except for the faint breathing inside James' cabin. Anna stirred under the blanket. The smell of smoke and cedar met her before her eyes opened. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. Her ribs ached, her lips split. Pain lived in every inch of her body. Then the memory rushed back, the fists, the cold, the shadow in the doorway that had ended it. She turned her head and saw him now. James sat by the hearth, feeding another log into the flames. The light caught in his hair, in the curve of his jaw, in the scar across his cheek. He looked more carved than alive, like something the mountain itself had made and forgotten to claim. Her breath hitched. For an instant, she thought she was seeing a ghost Daniel, her first love, the man who had died 8 years ago when soldiers raided an Apache camp along the San Pedro. But no, this man's eyes were darker, older, holding a silence Daniel had never carried. Beside her, a small hand touched her arm. "Mama," whispered Elia, "you're awake." Anna turned, tears pricking her eyes as she gathered the girl close. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" Elia shook her head. "He saved you, Mama. The Apache man. He fought Daddy and brought us here." Anna stiffened. "Where is he now?" "I'm right here," James said quietly. He rose from the fire and stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath his boots. The smell of cedar smoke followed him. Anna's heart thudded hard enough to make her dizzy. She tried to push herself upright, but pain held her down. "You're safe," he said. His voice was deep but calm, like a low drumbeat. "No one will touch you here." "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Why would you risk that for us?" James studied her for a long moment. His gaze wasn't hard, just searching. "A child came to my door," he said. "That was reason enough." He turned away before she could answer, pouring water from a kettle into a cup. "Drink. It'll ease the ache." She took it, her fingers trembling. Steam rose between them. The heat stung her cracked lip, but it felt like life returning. Outside, the snow began to fall again, gentler this time. Elias stood near the window, tracing circles in the frost with one finger. James moved about the room with quiet purpose, checking the fire, laying out strips of dried venison, stirring a pot on the stove. The cabin smelled of smoke and broth, the kind of scent that told of long winters survived by patience alone. "You're Apache," Anna said at last. He didn't look up. "I am. My husband." She swallowed hard. "He hates your kind." "I noticed," James said dryly. Something in his tone almost drew a smile a mile from her, but it vanished quickly. Shame crept over her like chill air. "You shouldn't have helped me. If he finds you—" "He already did," James interrupted, still stirring. "And I'm still breathing." Anna fell silent. She watched the way he moved, deliberate, measured, as though each gesture carried its own prayer. The scar along his cheek caught the light again, and memory pricked at her. Daniel had a scar too, smaller, near his temple. She'd loved tracing it with her fingertip once, in another life, when she still believed the world could be kind. Now she looked at James and saw Daniel's reflection there, same quiet strength, same stillness. A tremor went through her that had nothing to do with pain. Alicia came to James' side, small fingers clutching the edge of his coat. "Mister, can I help?" He glanced down. "You can hand me the bowl." She passed it to him solemnly, proud to be useful. He ladled the broth and set it before Anna. "Eat what you can," he said. "The herbs will help." She tasted it cautiously. It was bitter, then warm, then good. For the first time in months, she felt her body unclench. "Thank you," she murmured. James nodded once, as if thanks were unnecessary. By midday, Anna could sit up. Her bruises darkened, but her eyes were clearer. She asked where they were, and he told her 2 miles from town, near the ridge where the mesa turned red even under snow. "It's a lonely place," she said. "That's why I chose it." Elia had found a carved horse on a shelf, a small toy, cut from mesquite wood, its mane shaped by a careful knife. She ran it along the floor, making soft, whinnying sounds. The sight pulled a half-smile from Anna, something fragile and new. James watched from the hearth, silent. He wasn't used to voices in this space. For 3 winters, the cabin had known only fire, wind, and his own breathing. Now laughter, light, uncertain but real, drifted against the walls. He turned away, uneasy at the warmth it stirred. Anna saw it. "You live here alone?" "I did." "And your family? Gone?" His answer closed like a door. She didn't ask again. Still, she saw the flicker of grief beneath his stillness, the way his gaze lingered on the bundle of feathers above the hearth. Her heart tightened. She recognized that kind of silence. It was the same silence she'd carried through years of fists and fear. Outside, the wind shifted. James crossed to the window, looking toward the valley. Snow lay smooth and unbroken, but his eyes narrowed. Somewhere beyond the white horizon, the town was waking. By evening, he knew, word would spread. An Apache had taken in a white woman. In a place like this, rumor was more dangerous than any gun. When he turned back, Anna was watching him. "He'll come," she said softly. "I know. He won't stop until he's dragged me home." James met her gaze. "Then he'll have to find me first." Something in the way he said it, quiet, certain, made her believe him. That night the wind died altogether. The cabin felt almost peaceful. Elias slept on a pallet near the fire, clutching the wooden horse to her chest. Anna lay awake, staring at the rafters. James sat in his chair, sharpening a knife, the scrape steady as a heartbeat. After a long silence, Anna spoke. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Who?" "My first love." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He was Apache too. His name was Daniel Greyhawk." The knife stopped mid-stroke. James looked up slowly. "Daniel was my brother." Anna's breath caught. She hadn't meant to say his name, not yet. Maybe not ever. The firelight trembled across her face. He's dead," she whispered. "They said soldiers shot him near the San Pedro." Jamie nodded once. "I was there." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them filled with the ghosts of all they'd lost. Finally, Anna said, "He would have liked you." James gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was the better man. Anna looked toward her sleeping child. She would have liked him too. James didn't answer, but something in his expression softened. The flames crackled low, and in their glow, Anna thought she saw the faintest trace of peace settle over him. Outside, the snow began again, quiet as breath, covering the tracks of everything that had come before. The next morning broke pale and brittle. Frost clung to the inside of the windows, turning the cabin glass into frozen lace. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so wide that even the creak of James' boots sounded foreign in it. He rose before dawn, as he always did, and stepped outside. The snow came to his knees, crisp underfoot, glowing faintly in the first light. His breath smoked in the air while he walked to the barn. The horses whickered softly when they heard him, pressing their warm muzzles against his hands. He spoke to them in Apache, voice low, words meant more for memory than for meaning. By the time he returned, the sun had climbed a little above the mesa. Through the window he could see Anna, sitting near the hearth, her hair loose over her shoulders, the bruises on her cheek now fading to pale yellow. Elias sat cross-legged at her feet, the carved horse trotting through invisible fields across the floorboards. When James entered, Anna looked up quickly, as if caught between gratitude and shame. "You were out early," she said. "The animals don't know rest days," he replied, brushing snow from his coat. "You work alone out there?" He nodded. "Always have." Anna hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Elias says you talk to the horses. Sometimes they listen better than people." The girl giggled softly, then went back to her game. The sound was small, but good. It broke the hush that had ruled the cabin too long. Jamie moved about the room, setting a pot on the fire. The scent of coffee filled the air, bitter and comforting. He poured a cup and handed it to Anna. She took it carefully, the heat seeping into her cold fingers. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." He shrugged. Wasn't a choice to make, just a thing that needed doing. Anna watched the flames, her brow furrowed. You talk like him, you know. Like Daniel. James didn't answer. He took a seat opposite her, gaze fixed on the fire. The name of his brother still carried a weight he hadn't learned to set down. He used to talk too much, he said finally. Said silence made men lonely. Was he wrong? James smiled without warmth. He was dead a month later. Silence kept me alive. Anna lowered her eyes. There was nothing to say to that. As the hours passed, the cabin grew warmer. Elia wandered from chair to chair, curious about every tool and carving she found. James showed her how to whittle, guiding her small hands over the knife handle until she could shave curls of wood without cutting herself. Her laughter filled the air, light as snowmelt. Anna watched them, something tightening behind her ribs. The sight of James beside her daughter stirred feelings she wasn't ready to numb: comfort, gratitude, and the dangerous edge of something deeper. But the peace couldn't last. Late that afternoon, the sound of hooves broke across the frozen land. 3 riders, dark shapes against the white horizon, came slow along the creek. One carried a cross of wood lashed to his saddle, symbol of the church in Clay Hollow. James saw them first through the window. His jaw clenched. Stay inside, he told Anna. He stepped out, coat whipping in the wind, snow crunching under his boots. The riders halted a few yards from the porch. The one in front, a thin man in a wool coat and black hat, lifted a hand. Morning to you, Greyhawk, he called. His voice carried a preacher's rhythm. Name's Reverend Cole. Sheriff Dillard sent me ahead to ask a few questions. James said nothing. His eyes were level, unreadable. The Reverend continued. Word in town says you've taken in a white woman. Folks are uneasy. James' reply came quiet but firm. A woman beaten near to death needed help. That's all there is. Be that as it may, Cole said, dismounting carefully. The law sees it different. Her husband's been in Clay Hollow, showing bruises of his own, saying you attacked him and stole his wife. You know how men talk when they're angry. James didn't move. He's lying. I believe you. The Reverend's tone softened, but belief doesn't change tongues. You should send her back before this turns to something worse. The words hung cold in the air. Anna had come to the doorway despite James' warning. Her shawl clutched tight, eyes wide, she faced the preacher. I'm not going back, she said. He'll kill me next time. Cole looked at her, pity flickering in his expression. Ma'am, the world won't see it that way. They'll say the Apache lured you here. Then let them say, James said. The Reverend sighed, snow settling on his hat brim. You're a stubborn man, Greyhawk. I'll tell the sheriff you're keeping the peace, but I can't promise the others will. He swung back into his saddle. Clay Hollow remembers too much blood to forgive easy. They rode away, their tracks vanishing behind them almost instantly. Anna stepped onto the porch beside James. You shouldn't have argued. I didn't. His gaze stayed on the horizon. Arguing means I care what they think. You could be killed for this. So could you, he said, and went back inside. That evening, the weight of the visit settled over the cabin like another storm. Anna tried to help with chores, sweeping the floor, mending a torn shirt, but guilt pressed on her shoulders. She could feel the danger growing because of her presence. When James returned from the barn, she spoke quietly. I should leave. He looked at her, expression unbudged. Go where? North. To my sister in Prescott. It's far, but you'd never make it through the passes this time of year, he said. And even if you did, he'd find you. Men like him always find what they think they own. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Then what will happen to you? The Reverend's right, they'll call this kidnapping. James poured water into a tin cup, his voice steady. Let them call it what they want. I don't answer to their words. But she wanted to argue with you, to make him see the cost of his mercy. But something in his calm stopped her. He moved like a man who had already made peace with danger long ago. Elia, sensing her mother's unease, came to sit on her lap. Mama, he's not bad, the child whispered. He's like a mountain. The wind yells, but it can't move him. Anna held her close, fighting a tremor of fear and gratitude both. Night returned, heavy and blue. The fire burned low. James sat sharpening a small knife, the steel whispering against stone. Anna broke the silence. The Reverend said Clay Hollow remembers too much blood. What did he mean? James' eyes stayed on the blade. My people fought here. When the soldiers came, Daniel fought beside them, believing peace could be earned. The town saw that as betrayal. When he died, they called it justice. When I lived, they called it mercy gone wrong. Anna's voice shook. I never knew. Now you do. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of fire. Then Anna said softly, Daniel would be proud you're still standing. James set the knife down. Pride won't change the way they look at me. No, she said, but maybe kindness will. He glanced at her, the faintest smile touching his lips. Kindness doesn't last long in the West, Anna. But maybe this time it'll hold till spring. Outside, the wind began again, whispering through the cedars. Inside, Elias slept, curled near the fire, the wooden horse in her arms. James watched her, feeling the strange pull of something he couldn't name, a tie deeper than blood, older than the land itself. He didn't yet know the truth, but some part of him sensed it already. And as the firelight faded, he whispered to himself in Apache, what we save, we beoy. Winter deepened over Red Mesa. Each sunrise came slow and gray, spilling light across the snow like thin milk. The air stayed so cold that a man's breath froze in his beard before he could speak it. The world had grown quiet again, but beneath that stillness, trouble was moving. James knew it from the moment he saw the new tracks along the creek. 3 horses, shod and heavy, riding toward town. Luke Callan had friends, men who drank courage from whiskey and believed the law should carry their scent. He said nothing of it to Anna. Some truths were better carried alone. That morning, she stood by the fire brushing Elia's hair. The child hummed a tune half forgotten, something sweet that belonged to another life. James paused at the doorway, watching them. The cabin felt warmer with their presence, though he would never admit it aloud. Anna looked up and caught his gaze. You've been out since dawn, she said. You didn't even take breakfast. He shrugged. The fence near the south rise fell in the wind. Needed mending. She frowned. You do too much. He smiled faintly. Work keeps a man honest. Anna turned back to the fire, her eyes soft but shadowed. Honest men die the same as liars, she murmured. He didn't answer. Outside, wind scraped against the roof, carrying the sound of distant thunder not from the skio but from the land itself. The ground trembled faintly, a storm brewing far beyond the mesa's reach. Later that day, James took Elia to the barn to teach her how to feed the horses. She followed him eagerly, boots crunching through snow, laughter ringing in the air. He lifted her onto the fence rail and handed her a handful of oats. The mare, a chestnut named Whisper, nuzzled the girl's palm. She likes you, James said. Elia grinned. Because I'm quiet too. He chuckled low. Quiet's a strength, not a weakness, remember that. Anna watched from the cabin window. The sight filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in years, peace mixed with dread. James' patience with her daughter, his calm steadiness. It reminded her of Daniel again, yet deeper, forged from grief and solitude. When they returned, James handed Anna a folded blanket. For your hands, he said. You've been mending shirts in the cold. She smiled. You notice everything, don't you? I notice what matters. Their eyes met, the silence between them charged, fragile. Then Elia burst in with a laugh, breaking it like sunlight through glass. Anna turned quickly, hiding her blush in motion. That night, after the child slept, Anna spoke again. I heard you this morning, she said, speaking to the horses, but it wasn't English. My tongue, he said, Apache. What did you say? James hesitated, then replied, I asked the land to keep them safe, and to forgive me if it couldn't. Anna's voice trembled. You think we're in danger? I think men like your husband don't forget shame. The storm outside isn't the one I'm watching. She shivered despite the fire. Maybe I should go. He shook his head. He'd find you before you reached the pass. The only safe place now is here. Safe? She whispered, glancing toward the door. You call this safe? James' gaze softened. It's safer than anywhere else with me between you and him. Her breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped and snow drifted quietly outside the window. Why do you care? She asked finally. You don't even know me. He looked into the flames. I know what it means to lose someone and be left standing after. No one deserves that, he says. Anna studied him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. She wanted to tell him about Daniel, then about the child he had never met, the life she'd hidden out of fear, but the words tangled in her throat. The truth was too heavy to set free. Not yet. The next morning brought signs of change. The wind shifted south, sharp and restless. Crows gathered on the ridge, their cries cutting through the cold air. When James went to fetch water from the well, he saw fresh hoofprints again, closer this time, circling like wolves testing a fence. He returned inside, jaw tight. If anyone rides this way, you and Eliel stay low. Don't open that door unless it's me. Anna's hand trembled around her cup. You saw them? He nodded once. 3 riders, same as before. She bit her lip. He's coming. Yes, James said quietly. He is. That evening, the first flakes of snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, like the start of a prayer. James worked at the window, hammering the latch tighter, while Anna set stew on the fire. The scent filled the room, rich with herbs he'd gathered from the ridge. When she brought him a bowl, he nodded in thanks. You cook better than you think. I used to hate it, she said, but lately it feels peaceful. Peace is something you make, he said. Same as fire, same as shelter. It doesn't come on its own. Anna sat opposite him, watching the flames dance. You speak like someone older than 32. Loss ages a man faster than years, he replied. They ate in silence, the only sound the soft wind outside. Ilke slept early, worn from play. After a while, Anna spoke again, voice trembling. If they come, if something happens, promise me you'll protect her first. James set his bowl down. You don't have to ask. Promise me, she insisted. He met her eyes. I swear it. The words settled between them, solid as stone. Later, when the fire burned low, Anna stirred from her blanket. James? He looked up from where he sat sharpening a blade. If I don't make it through this, I need you to know something. He frowned. Don't talk like that. It's important, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Elia, she's Daniel's daughter. The knife paused midair. For a long moment, James didn't move. The room felt suddenly smaller, the silence sharper. She's what? Anna's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to hide it. When Daniel died, I was already carrying her. I married Luke to keep her safe, to keep the world from knowing. James set the knife down slowly. The fire crackled, its light flickering over his face, shock, sorrow, and something deeper that even he couldn't name. "All this time," he murmured, "and you never told me. I was afraid you'd hate me, or think I used you." He shook his head. "I don't hate you, Anna. I just didn't know how close blood could hide itself." He looked toward the sleeping child, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "She has his eyes," he said softly. Anna nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I see him in her every day." James' voice dropped low, full of something that sounded like reverence. "Then she's family. And family doesn't get left behind." Outside, thunder rolled again, farther this time, but heavier. The smell of snow thickened in the air, mingled with something metallic, like thrown. James rose, crossed to the door, and peered into the dark. Distant along the ridge, faint lanterns moved, 4 of them now, cutting through the wind. "They're coming," he said quietly. Anna stood, her face pale in the firelight. "Tonight? Before dawn?" He turned back, eyes steady. "Get Elia ready. Whatever happens, you stay behind me." Anna's voice shook. "You can't fight them all." He reached for his rifle, the metal gleaming dull and certain. "Maybe not. But I can make them think twice about coming again." The wind rose, howling against the cabin walls. Snow swept through the cracks, whispering like ghosts between the logs. Anna moved to his side, trembling, but unbroken. "Then we face it together," she said. He glanced at her, and for the first time, his silence broke into something like a smile. "Together, then." Outside, the storm gathered its full strength, rolling down from the high mesas. The light of the approaching lanterns wavered through the snow, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The wind rose before dawn, a low, living thing that rattled the shutters and breathed through every crack in the cabin's walls. Snow moved sideways, biting at the wood like teeth. James stood by the window, lantern dim behind him, watching the dark ridge where the creek cut through the valley. 4 small lights burned out there, lanterns swaying in the hands of men who had come with purpose. Anna sat near the hearth, Elia pressed against her. The child still half slept, her small hand clinging to her mother's shawl. James turned from the window and knelt beside them. "They'll be here soon," he said quietly. "When I tell you, go to the back room. Don't open that door unless you hear my voice." Anna's eyes found his, wide with fear. "James, you can't." He shook his head. "There's no can't, Anna. Only what has to be done." The wind screamed outside, shaking the roof. He rose, took his rifle from its place above the mantel, checked the chamber, and slung it over his shoulder. Then he pulled on his coat, tied the thong at his neck, and stepped to the door. Anna caught his arm. "Promise me you'll come back inside." He looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "If the land allows," he said. And then he was gone. The storm swallowed him whole. The snow came heavy, driving sideways across the flats. James moved down the path toward the barn, his boots sinking deep. He could hear the distant creak of saddles, the murmur of men trying to steady their horses in the gale. When he reached the yard, he saw them through the white 4 shapes moving slow, lanterns swinging like ghostly stars. One voice rose above the storm. "Greyhawk." It was Luke Callan, thick with drink and fury. "You got something of mine, and I come to take it back." James stepped forward, his shadow long against the snow. "You lost the right to claim anything, Callan." Luke laughed, harsh and mean. "You think you can steal my wife? You think that half-breed blood makes you a savior?" Behind him, one of the other men shifted nervously. "Luke, maybe we wait till the storm." "Shut your mouth," Luke barked. "I'll handle this." He swung down from his horse, staggered once in the drift, and drew his revolver. The others followed, slow and uncertain. James didn't move, The wind howled between them, flinging snow into their faces. "I won't warn you again," James said. "Turn back while you can." Luke spat into the snow. "You ain't the one doing the warning." He raised his gun and fired. The shot cracked through the night, bright against the storm. James dropped to one knee, the bullet slicing past his shoulder. He rolled, brought his rifle up, and fired once. The blast echoed off the cliffs. One of Luke's men fell backward into the snow, his lantern dropping, flames snuffed out by the wind. The other two hesitated. "Hell with this," one muttered. But Luke roared, "You run and I'll shoot you myself." James chambered another round, breath steady despite the cold burning his lungs. "You can still leave," he called out. "There's no shame in walking away from a dead man's fight." Luke snarled and charged forward, firing again. James' second shot caught the gun clean from his hand, sending it spinning into the dark. Luke stumbled, howling with rage. Then he slammed into James, both men going down in the snow. They rolled, fists swinging, boots sliding across the ice. The wind roared around them like a crowd. Luke landed a wild punch to James' jaw, another to his ribs. James answered with a blow that sent blood flying from Luke's mouth. They broke apart, gasping. "Why?" Luke spat. "She's mine. She was always mine. She was never yours to break," James said. Luke lunged again, knocking them both into the drift. He reached for a knife at his belt, but James caught his wrist and twisted hard until the blade fell free. Then, with a sound like thunder, James drove his fist into Luke's chest, sending him sprawling on his back. The two remaining men stepped forward uncertainly. "Luke, let it go," one shouted. But Luke only laughed through broken teeth. "Go on then, Apache. Finish it. That's what you people do, ain't it? Kill what don't belong to you." James rose slowly. Snow plastered his hair to his face. He stood over Luke, rifle in hand. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his breath and the hiss of snow across the ground. He could have ended it. One pull of the trigger, and the storm would wash the blood away by morning. But through the noise came another sound, a child's cry carried faint and small from the cabin. "James!" It was Eliah's voice. He froze. That small, trembling voice cut deeper than Luke's hatred ever could. He lowered the rifle. "This isn't justice," he said quietly. "It's mercy you'll never understand." Luke stared up at him, disbelief twisting into something close to fear. James stepped back. "Take him," he said to the other men. "Get him out of here before he freezes." They hesitated, then grabbed Luke by the arms, dragging him to his horse. He cursed, fought, but the fight had gone from his limbs. The storm swallowed their shapes one by one until only the wind remained. James stood a long time in the snow, chest heaving, blood dripping from his split lip. The rifle hung loose in his hand. The land around him was white and empty, the kind of silence that comes only after violence. He looked toward the cabin, the faint glow of firelight spilling through the window, and began to walk. When he stepped inside, Anna rose from the floor, eyes wet with relief. Eliah ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." He sank to one knee, resting a hand on her hair. Then he looked at Anna. Her face was pale but strong, her gaze full of everything words couldn't hold. "It's done," he said, "for now." Anna moved to him, trembling. "You could have killed him." "I know. Why didn't you?" He glanced toward the fire. "Because death doesn't end hate. It just passes it on." She reached for his hand, her fingers cold against his skin. "Then what will you do when they come again?" "I'll face them," he said, "same as this storm." Eliah pressed closer, her small voice barely a breath. "Is it over, James?" He looked down at her, the shadow of a smile touching his mouth. "The storm's passing, little one. That's enough for tonight." He set his rifle aside and sat by the fire. Anna knelt beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. Outside, the wind softened, turning from a howl to a sigh. Snow fell slower, gentler, as if the land itself had grown tired of anger. For the first time in years, James let the silence mean something different. Not loneliness, not regret, but peace earned the hard way. Morning came slow, spilling gold across the snow like a mercy the night had earned. The storm had passed. Red Mesa stood clear again, its cliffs washed in pale sunlight, streaked with the red earth beneath the melting frost. Smoke rose steady from James' chimney, thin and peaceful. Inside, the cabin breathed warmth and quiet. Anna woke first. The fire was only coals now, glowing like the heart of some old beast. James sat in his chair by the hearth, half asleep, his coat still dusted with snow. The rifle leaned beside him, unfired since the night before. For a long while, she just watched him, the way dawn softened his roughness, the way peace sat awkward on his shoulders, like a new coat not yet broken in. Elias stirred on her pallet, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, is it morning?" Anna smiled and drew her close. "It is, sweetheart. The storm's gone." The girl peered toward the window, where sunlight sparkled off the frost. "Did James stop it?" Anna brushed a curl from her daughter's face. "Maybe he helped." James opened one eye at that, a hint of a grin tugging the corner of his mouth. "Don't go giving me more credit than I deserve." His voice came low and rasped from the cold. "The land does what it wants." Elia giggled, and the sound filled the room with something the storm had tried to take hope. Later, when the sun rose higher, James stepped outside. The air was sharp, but still. The world glittered clean and new. He could see the tracks from the night before half buried by fresh snow, the only proof of what had happened. He walked to the barn, checking the horses, running his hands along their warm necks. Whisper nickered softly, breath pluming in the light. Behind him, footsteps crunched. He turned to find Anna, standing near the fence, wrapped in a shawl, her cheeks touched with color again. "You shouldn't be out," he said, still cold enough to bite. "I needed to see it," she replied. "It's strange everything looks so calm, like the world forgot what happened." "The world forgets quicker than men," James said. She nodded, gaze tracing the red cliffs. "He'll tell them, won't he? The town. He'll tell what suits him. And they'll come." James looked out toward the valley where Clay Hollow slept beneath smoke and distance. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll decide the snow buried enough ghosts already." Anna hugged herself, silent for a moment. "When I first met Daniel," she said softly, "he used to talk about peace the way a man talks about rain in a drought. He thought if he could prove one Apache heart was good, the rest of the world would change." James' voice gentled. "He believed too much." She glanced at him. "And you?" "I believe what I see. And right now, I see two people who shouldn't have survived a storm but did." Anna smiled faintly. "Maybe that's enough belief for one lifetime." By noon, the sheriff arrived. The crunch of hooves on frozen ground, carried long before the rider appeared, a lone figure in a heavy coat, scarf drawn high over his face. He reined in slow at the gate, raised a gloved hand. "Greyhawk," he called, voice muffled. "Need a word?" James met him halfway, snow creaking beneath his boots. "Sheriff Dillard." The man's eyes were tired. "Heard about last night. Luke Callan came limping into town before dawn, half drunk and half frozen, shouting you tried to kill him." James said nothing. The sheriff sighed, rubbing frost from his beard. "3 witnesses say otherwise. They said you had every right to finish him and didn't. That counts for something in my book." Anna stepped from the porch then, holding Elia's hand. The sheriff's gaze softened when he saw them. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded. "Thanks to him." Dillard tipped his hat toward James. That's what I figured. He paused, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Still, folks in Clay Hollow will talk. They always do. Might be best you keep close to the mesa for a while. I wasn't planning on leaving, James said. Good. Then I can tell them the matter's settled. The sheriff shifted in his saddle. World's changing, Greyhawk. Slow, mean, but it's changing. Maybe one day they'll see what you did here for what it was. He turned his horse, then looked back once. Take care of that family, you hear? James inclined his head. I hear. When the sheriff rode off, his tracks stretched long and lonely through the snow until they disappeared behind the ridge. That evening, the ski burned red over the mesa. Clouds glowed like coals, and the wind smelled of thawing earth. Inside, James repaired a broken hinge on the barn door, while Anna stirred stew by the fire. Elia hummed to herself, carving lines into the wooden horse James had given her, whispering names to it, names from the land. Mesa, whisper, dawn. Anna watched her daughter, then looked at James. She's happy here. He tightened the hinge, testing it. So is the land. It likes having laughter again. Anna smiled softly. When spring comes, maybe we can plant something. There's a small patch by the creek. He nodded. The soil's good there. Red earth holds life even after fire. For a moment, the Molonies settled between them, comfortable and deep. Then Anna spoke, voice low. You know, she asks about her father sometimes, about Daniel. James straightened, eyes shadowed by the dying light. What do you tell her? The truth I can, that he was brave and that he wanted her to live free. He nodded slowly. That's enough. Anna stepped closer, hesitating before touching his arm. And when she asks about you? He looked down at her hand, then back to her eyes. Tell her I'm a man who kept a promise. Later, when darkness came, the three of them sat before the fire. Outside, the last snowflakes melted from the eaves, dripping like quiet clocks marking a new beginning. Elia leaned against James' knee, half asleep. Will the bad men come back? She murmured. No, he said softly. The wind carried them away. Will you always stay here? He paused, then brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. As long as you and your mama need me. Anna met his gaze across the fire. The light painted her face gold and warm, and for the first time since Daniel's death, she didn't look haunted. That might be a long time, she said. James' lips curved faintly. I've got nowhere else to be. Outside, an owl called from the pines, its cry lonely but not sad. The world beyond the walls was wide and cold, yet inside that small circle of light, the air held something stronger than any storm belonging. Just before sleep, Anna whispered, James? He turned toward her. Why do you stay? You could go back to your people. Start over. He thought a long moment. Maybe I already have. She smiled, the kind that comes from deep places of peace. By dawn, the first snowmelt ran down from the mesa, carving thin veins through the red soil. The land breathed again. The air smelled of pine and wet earth and promise. James stood outside, Elia beside him, her small hand folded in his. They watched the horizon turn crimson, sunlight climbing over the ridge until it washed the cabin in gold. Anna joined them a moment later, shawl wrapped tight. She stood close enough that their shoulders brushed, and none of them spoke. Words weren't needed. Far above, a red-tailed hawk circled in the new light, its cry cutting sharp through the clean morning air. James watched it rise higher, wings catching the sun. The land forgets blood, he murmured, but remembers kindness. Anna reached for his hand, holding it steady in hers, and together they watched the day begin.